Hey guys, welcome to my second motorcycle review. This time I'm showing you my 2011 Victory Hammer S. I've had this for about a year. I bought it last September, as it were, and it's September now. I waited a little while to show you this because I wanted to get really acquainted with the motorcycle and ride it around for about a year until I got a really good feel for the motorcycle and the way it rides and the way it performs. Public transport. Yeah, so you saw my video, a lot of you saw my video on my 1984 Honda CB750 Nighthawk S, which I sold last year, like I said, and I bought this. I made a short video about the transaction there that I made. Maybe some of you saw that. So I bought this bike used, obviously. It's 2011. I'm going to cover during this review, obviously, the way it looks, the engine, the suspension, transmission, the brakes, and just the overall handling and the feel of the thing. I'm going to get something really quickly out of the way right from the get-go. I think it looks awesome. There are a few pointers on this that I really like, if you'll excuse my shade here. First off, as you'll notice pretty quickly, it's got the really fat, massive 250 section rear tire on there. I'm going to get more into the back tire a bit later when I'm on the bike riding it, so that I can tell you how it feels when you're riding a motorcycle with such a fat tire on the back. This is a muscle cruiser for sure. It's got the matte paint finish on it, which I really like. Maybe some of you will notice the bike isn't exactly tip-top clean. There's some bugs on there. It doesn't really matter because with this paint finish, it doesn't look that dirty. I try to avoid washing it too much because you don't want to damage the paint. With a lot of the soaps on the market are really acidic, and you want to avoid damaging the matte finish on here. So I wash it maybe 2 or 3 times a year tops. Otherwise, it looks pretty good. So more on the way it looks, some of you will notice that I did put an aftermarket seat on here. If you watched my video on the Honda, my main complaint was that if I took a longer ride with, specifically with my girlfriend, she didn't have any room on there. So I bought this from Drag Specialties. Works really well. It's a lot wider and a lot thicker than the stock seat, and it's got the backrest. I just leave it on there because it's bolted from underneath the fender in the back, and it's a bit of a pain in the neck to take off and put the stock seat back on. I don't mind. This seat is a lot more comfortable than the stock seat, and I'm sort of okay with the way it looks. I mean, the sissy bar look is okay to me. I mean, obviously when you're riding it, you don't notice. More on the way that it looks, specifically some of maybe the quality issues that I found on it. And these are minor gripes. I mean, I could have bought a new one for about twice as much as I paid for this, but it was used. It had about 22,000 clicks on it, so it had a bit of a not a patina to it, but a few things that I noticed that maybe a Victory could have done differently. First off is the material they chose to make the timing cover little chrome piece here. It's obviously a plastic insert, and the chrome it doesn't chip off, but it discolors, and it's not too nice looking, if you guys can tell there. Some other things. For the look of this motorcycle, they blacked out a lot of features. So the gauges are originally chrome under here, and if you can tell, this I'm going to do it for you. This actually does peel off. It's like a plasti dip sort of thing. So over time, this is going to peel all off. Same thing for the actual backside of the gauge. You see, if you hit a rock or a pebble or something, it's going to flake off, and it's going to cause some aesthetic issues there. Other than that, you know, where you put your key is the same thing here. So I don't know if the light is good enough, but you know, sometimes your leg might rub up against here, and the normal sort of stock version of these covers are chromed plastic, and they will peel off this little black finish here. I could do it again with the plasti dip or whatever. I don't care. If I need to, I'll replace it. But yeah, you can see where you put your key there. It's gonna flake off slowly. So these are some of the minor sort of aesthetic gripes I might have with it. But overall, the fit and finish and the quality of the build is really nice and really impressive. Quickly on the specs, I'm going to tell you more about the numbers maybe as I'm riding along, but this has the engine you want from Victory. It has the 106 cubic inch V-twin. It's 1731 cc's for, you know, the metric system there. 1.73 liters if you're so inclined. On the stock form, it's got 97 horsepower and 113 foot-pounds of torque right next to idle. It's got all the power you could ever need. I'll show you a bit later. It's coupled with a 6-speed gearbox, which is very nice. I'll talk about the gearbox a little bit later. It's a gear-driven primary motorcycle, so you have to get used to that a little bit. It could be a little bit clunky at times. You get used to it. I really like it. There's no chains or belts to adjust or whatever for the primary there. It's all gear driven. It's going to last forever, and I really like this engine. So specifically for the Hammer lineup, when they started making this, was it 2005, 6, 7, somewhere in there? It was fitted with the 100 cubic inch engine, and then they came out with the Hammer S, which had a couple of different aesthetic cues. It had the sort of racing stripes you see there. It had the tachometer, the HID head bulb and headlight bulb, and it came with the 106 from 2010 or 11 or around these years that I bought it. And it came with what Victory called their stage 2 cam. So this is an 8-valve engine. It's a dual overhead cam, so it came with a set of cams with evidently a bit more duration and a little bit more lift. It's a little bit more responsive. It revs quite nicely, and I rode my mom's Victory Vegas at the time. She had the 100 cubic inch with the standard cam, and this feels much different. The torque is very nice on this. It's got upside down forks, as you can see, which make the bike very stiff on the front end and very responsive. I like those too. My mom's Vegas had the regular sort of fork arrangement, and that felt different. And this front wheel is a little bit smaller than the one on the Vegas, so it feels a little bit more responsive in the bendies. Up front, you got dual disc brakes with 2 piston calipers on each side. The front brakes are adequate. The back brakes are really good, actually. It's the same sort of disc and caliper arrangement as the front, but it's got a single, and the back brakes are really good on this. The front brakes are okay. If you listen to a lot of reviews, good, not great is the feeling of the front brake. It is a belt drive, final drive. You don't have to worry about this belt until you hit around 85 to 100,000 kilometers on this. So almost no maintenance. You just have to sometimes just visually inspect it and check out the belt tension. That's about it. I didn't make too many changes on this, other than I told you about the seat. The exhaust is different. I will get to the exhaust at some point, and it's got different grips that I'm actually going to change today. I'm not entirely sure where these are from. Maybe they're from the Nest collection or whatever. They don't have any rubber on them, and you feel a bit more of the vibrations. And if you're riding in an area with bad roads, you feel it a lot. And for longer rides, it gets kind of tiresome. And if you could tell, there's a bit of a curve in there. So sometimes you don't quite know where to put your hand. You kind of want to move around. So I'm going to put a set of this, standard, nice, popular Kuryakins on there with some nice rubber inserts there to make it a bit more comfortable. So here's the gauge arrangement. Very straightforward analog gauges. So tachometer on the right there, and then you got your speedometer and odometer on the left. So if I show you they're backlit blue at night, which makes it kind of cool, and you got that sort of hot rod thing with the white gauges. You have a clock, obviously, and then you have the odometer on the trip setting. It's got a digital RPM readout, which is next to useless, and then it's got your total odometer there. So I'm on 28,815 kilometers on this. So this gives you a good idea of what a bike looks like when it's been ridden for about 30K. So the gauges are fine. They're easy to read. They're at a right height when you're riding. You don't really have to take your eyes off the road. It's really easy. The one gripe I have about the gauges is that there's no fuel gauge. When this was new, it was about $22,000. I would have liked to have seen Victory incorporate a fuel gauge. I mean, maybe on the bottom of the rev counter, you could have put a fuel gauge there. There's a gallon left in the fuel tank when the light turns on. That's about it. So I use the trip meter, and at about 275, 280 clicks, the light will turn on. So I gauged there about the time that I want to fuel back up. Yeah, they could have put a fuel gauge on this. I think it would have been less than luxurious to have done so. So there. Otherwise, the controls are easy to reach, very straightforward. You got your indicators here, you got your four-way, and then you got your high and low beam and the and the horn, obviously. And on this side, all you got is the kill switch and the starter button. Very, very, very straightforward. The clutch is cable operated, so is the throttle, so you don't have the luxury of being able to add cruise control on this. I'll get more on the clutch and the brake later. I just wanted to show you the way that it looks when you're riding it. The mirrors are quite good. These are the standard Victory mirrors. They put them on pretty much all of their bikes, all of their cruisers, without a fairing there. You could get chrome. They black them out for this motorcycle, so it looks kind of cool. All right, so before I go any further, I do have a little secret on this motorcycle. I went and bought an adjustable exhaust system with a valve that'll open or shut at my whim, and that'll make the bike very, very silent or quite loud. So for the sake of this review, I'm gonna use the silent mode just so that you can hear me a little bit better, and I'll turn the sound up at a certain point just to annoy you, entertain you, and show you the way that the engine sounds when the exhaust is open. I'm going to do another video on the exhaust at CGC Motorcycles. It should come out pretty soon after this review comes out, so stay tuned for that and check it out. So I only had a couple hours to shoot this, so I didn't bring you to some sort of desolate road with drone shots and a production assistant in a chase car. This is pretty low rent here, but a lot of you guys saw my Honda review and liked it, so I decided to bring you back to the same area. How's that? So the first thing I want to talk about is the way the engine feels. In a few words, very, very, very nice. It's got power for days. It's got torque all over the rev band. As I said before, on the stock, right out of the crate, 97 horses with 113 foot-pounds. I went and put a K&N filter in here, and the exhaust might add a couple of horsepower, not more than maybe 4 or 5% gain, which I've never had it without it, so I can't tell you how it felt before or after the exhaust. I just know that it feels a bit faster because I'm having way too much fun with the exhaust open with all the noise. So the engine, like I said, around the city, very nice. It's happiest between 2 and 4 grand, and I accidentally started in second. You know, I'm talking, so I have to concentrate, and it would have been fine if I had left it in second, honestly. It's got all the torque in the world. You can pot around in 4th gear at this speed, honestly, and it'll chug along no problem. It has enough torque that if I wanted to, I could pot around in a parking lot on idle with like my hands on the bars and not even touching the throttle, not even feathering the clutch or the brake or whatever, and it would be fine. It would sort of chug along at 5 or 6 kilometers an hour and not care. That's also pretty good in next to standstill traffic. You don't have to use the clutch a lot, which helps, and it'll do it, and it's no problem at all. So engine is, honestly, it's a 9 out of 10. It's very, very nice. It's smooth. There aren't a lot of vibrations. You can do whatever you want with it. It's got enough power that you can ride all day long on the highway. It's smooth enough that you could ride in the city. This is from my point of view, a masterpiece of an engine with this cam in it, and the way that it's set up is very, very nice. If you have the opportunity to demo ride one of these things, it's very, very cool. Transmission and clutch. Well, it's a cable operated clutch. It's a bit on the heavy side. Victory does sell an easy clutch fitting that you can add an extra length of a pulley on the clutch linkage underneath, which will make it a bit lighter. This didn't come with it. I got long enough fingers and strong enough hands that I could just grab the clutch no problem. The friction point is a little bit on the fingertip, so you don't have to engage the clutch sort of fully on the lever to get what you need. You get used to it pretty quick, and it's an easy setup to use and get used to. It's no problem. Like I said before, 6-speed transmission. It is pretty smooth. It's clunky and it's a little bit agricultural. I happen to like that. It feels like a strong quality item. I feel that, you know, the shifting is even. The throw on the lever is quite short. I like that. and I just enjoy the transmission overall. It is a little bit clunky between first and second. Like a lot of bikes, you sort of have to find the sweet spot, and my advice for someone riding a Victory like this one is to just really be energetic, for a lack of a better word, with the gear shifts. Just sort of make sure that it's selected the gear properly, especially when you go from first to second. You end up finding the right shifting points. Like if you shift around 3 grand, you'll be fine, and it's really no problem. Like around here, just boom, put it in second and you're okay. If you try to short shift it at low speeds and you're not strong enough with your kick into second, what might happen is it'll plop out of second into neutral, and that's a bit unsettling. So if I'm honest, you want to try to avoid doing that. You want to shift into second around 3 grand and you'll be perfectly fine. So suspension and handling. When talking about the handling, like I said before, you notice the upside down front fork makes it really stiff and responsive. If you're energetic going into corners, you'll be satisfied with the way this motorcycle handles. Also, when talking about the handling, you have to talk about the big 250 section rear tire. Some people are a bit uneasy about it at first. It is a fat, wide tire. Thank you, sir. So you have to get used to it a little bit. Now I'm 235 pounds, so when I throw my weight around this and use appropriate counter steering techniques, I actually really like the big tire in the back. It'll lean over no problem. Even at low speeds, you know, a U-turn in a parking lot, any sort of low speed maneuver, it's completely okay and it's completely docile. Again, you use appropriate counter steer techniques and it'll lean over no problem. Because the forward controls, the angle you can achieve on a turn is nice and aggressive for a cruiser like this, and the ground clearance is very good on the exhaust. You never have to worry about it. You'll scrape the pegs before you scrape anything else. I've done it numerous times and it feels completely okay. And the back tire actually gives you a lot of confidence to know that at the maximum lead angle, when you do start to scrape the pegs, you have all this rubber left on the back tire and you'll never run out. And even if you lean it really hard, your chicken strips still stay about 1.5 inches wide on the back tire. So you have all of this tire to use if you wanted to. You do have to watch out for the way that it wears. Obviously, it'll wear in the middle a lot sooner, so it will develop a sort of flat spot that you have to look out for. When I bought this, the back tire was new. I put about 10,000 kilometers on it already, and it feels completely fine. It looks completely okay, and I know that I could probably get another 8 to 10K out of it pretty good. So no problem there. They put a back tire on this just to handle all the power and obviously to make the bike look really cool. So if you're gonna look into a bike with a big tire, especially if it's a Victory like this, I haven't ridden any of the big tire bikes from Harley-Davidson, for example, or maybe the 109R from Suzuki, anything like that, but I know, because I know people that have had them and that have ridden them, they tell me that you have to be really aggressive with the way that you turn the motorcycle. For me, like I said, just hand inputs with counter steering techniques when you're doing a turn, and it'll just go into the corner really well. It holds its line really well. If you do have to change your line a little bit, you can just use the engine to do that. It's got so much compression that you don't even have to dab the back brake, say, to just lean more into it. Just let go of the throttle, the bike will dip down a little bit, and you'll be fine. There's no stop here, but I still want to slow down. This is a train station. So that's for the handling. Like I said, 8 out of 10 at least for handling. Again, for a muscle cruiser, is very nice. The brakes are adequate. There's nothing I can say about it. The front brakes are okay. This isn't a light or a heavy bike. It's sort of in the average of a bike for this size. And the front brakes are okay. They do have good feel, even if they don't have the most bite. They have good feel. The back brakes are really good, and they feel very nice. So in the city like this, I use a lot of back brake just for low speed maneuvers. And if you need to use the front brake for anything, it's fine. You can be precise with your braking. Like if I wanted to just clutch in, use the back and the front, and just sort of aim the front wheel just before the line there, you're good. You're able to do that and be precise with your braking. All right, hopefully you'll be able to hear this. I'm going to turn right here, and this street has a way bigger speed limit, so I can open the exhaust. and let you hear what it sounds like when you give it the beans. If you want to be a crazy hooligan with this, you can definitely have a lot of fun. I like to stay within the limits of the law most of the time. The cops here don't like bikes that are too loud or that look too fast or whatever, so they do look out for you. So, and honestly, I'm doing 70, you can do 75, 80, you know, on a street like this, no problem, but this is where the bike is most comfortable anyways. This is a cruiser, it's not a touring machine. If you're gonna try to ride this cross country, you can, but you're gonna want to stay on sort of B roads like this, and ride, you know, a little bit under 100k an hour, just to stay on the comfort side. This is where it's happiest, you know. And if I want to, fourth gear, give it some beans, and you're gone. So, like I said, it's got all the power in the world. You can lug it and then take off, and you'll be very happy about the way that it performs. So a little test here of the lean angle. So just maybe to finish up here about some of the things I don't really like about the bike. There are few, but there are some. If you listened to my Honda review, I said that I wanted to get a big cruiser to ride longer distances in more comfort. I rode this the first weekend that I bought it. I rode it to New Brunswick. That's about 1,100 clicks. It did it, but I mean, again, with all the wind and the cross breeze sometimes that you have, and the numb butt because I had the stock seat on there, it'll do it. It's a lot better than what the Honda did before, but still, if you want to ride this cross country or something, you might want to look at other motorcycles in the Victory Polaris range, like a cross country tour, a Victory Vision if you like the way that looks, or something in the Indian lineup like a Chieftain or Roadmaster if you can afford one. Those are crazy nice, but they're expensive. You want to look at something with a fairing maybe that you can ride longer distances. When I bought it, this bike, I mean, I bought Memphis Shades fairing for it. It was a nice quality item. It was nice. I bought the tallest windscreen you can get for it, which is 12 inches. Because of the way the geometry of this bike is set up, you're sitting quite high up in it. You're not sort of hunched into the motorcycle as much. Like, the tank is pretty low, it's not up here. So what happens is my head, and again, I'm only 6 feet tall, it's not like I'm 6'5" or anything. My head would be over the bubble that the windshield would have provided, and the buffeting on the back side of the bubble was right in my ears, and it was really, really uncomfortable. So I took it off and I sold it. Didn't lose much. I sold it. It was brand new. It's fine. It's just yeah, that wasn't fun, because I guess the geometry of these forks, it's not meant to have any sort of wind protection on it. You can if you're shorter, but I would recommend against it. So again, for way longer rides, you might want to get a touring bike, but the geometry of how you're sitting, the hands, the feet, is fine, and bumpy. Jeez. And the seat from Drag Specialties, this touring seat, is a lot better than the standard seat, the stock seat that this bike came with. It doesn't look the same, obviously, but hey, that's sometimes the trade-off that you have to make. Maybe another thing for city driving like this on shit roads, the suspension, because this is a sort of muscle sports cruiser, is quite hard. They could have sprung it a little bit more and dampened it a little bit less, if that makes sense. Just overall make it a bit softer with a bit more travel. I get what they were trying to do, and obviously with the big tire like this, it's like low slung and it's just hunkered down a lot, so they haven't made it too soft. It responds really well with the way the suspension is set up, but if you're looking for something soft and plush and comfortable, again, you might want to look at something else. I think it's fine, it's just some people might find it quite hard. And then lastly, and maybe most importantly, and you should know this if you're looking into buying any Victory, they stopped producing them at the end of 2016. Polaris made the decision to focus their efforts on business development and research on the Indian brand. And that makes total sense. If you look at the way the business and the market is set up, why wouldn't you focus on the notoriety and the image that is the Indian brand, and then take your energy maybe away from Victory and do that. The dealer network is still trained to handle the Victory motorcycles, and Polaris, being a big company, will still provide replacement OEM parts for 10 years, which is fine. They will obviously honor the warranties. If you have a newer motorcycle, you're good. Yeah, so that's something that you might consider. Obviously, they might not keep their value as much for now as another brand. I bought this before it was announced that Victory was going to cease production, and it was 5 years old. It had 22,000 clicks for it, and I paid half the retail, and the bike looked brand new when I looked at it. So for me, it was a good purchase. Now I'll keep this probably until the wheels fall off, or until I can afford maybe another bike, something like a touring motorcycle or something. So we'll see how long I keep this for, but I'm not really concerned with the depreciation as much as others might be. It is what it is, you live with it. But just so you know, Polaris decided to stop making Victories. They do have a following. People really like these bikes, and they tend to keep them. And because of this, the aftermarket section of what you can maybe buy is actually quite nice. People still make aftermarket parts for these things, and my opinion is I think you should be fine if you have one of these and you're concerned with the fact that Polaris stopped making them. It's not like there were bad bikes, it's just they wanted to focus on Indian more, and that makes sense. If you look at the way that the American motorcycle market is set up, they're looking at a new war between Harley-Davidson and Indian, and I think Harley-Davidson is better off for it, in my opinion. How's it going? Nice. So I hope you enjoyed this review. It was a bit longer than the one I did for the Honda. Simply put, I haven't seen a proper review, like an end user review on this bike online, so I decided to make this for you, like you have on the Honda video that you can check out below. I am putting a link to it here, but please leave a comment, suggestion for future videos. If you want to see what kit I'm using and you want me to review that, that's perfectly fine. I make these videos for fun. You know, production value might not be up there, but I enjoy making these just for everyone's benefit, and I think it's pretty cool. So thanks for watching again. I'm back at the church, and I'll catch you guys out soon. Thanks.